On this episode of China Uncensored, if you can't report the news, stage it. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Now, if there's one thing I hate more than anything else, it's facts. Not only do they make you think, which 9 out of 10 doctors say is the leading cause of wrinkles, a fact I just made up, but they also get in the way of telling a really great story. Like that giant television screen in Beijing that only plays footage of a sunrise to compensate for the lack of visible sunrises due to pollution. Now, the facts would have you believe that it's really just a tourism ad for Shandong province, and the sunrise is only part of the clip and that... Oh, sorry, I fell asleep there for a second. You see, that's what facts do. They take a perfectly good story and ruin it, just because it happens not to be true. Luckily, there are news organizations out there that have the same disdain for facts that I do, namely Chinese state-run media. Whether they're reporting that a shadow government of Nazi space aliens secretly controls the United States, or that North Korea's Kim Jong-un has been named the sexiest man alive, they have an appreciation for the craft of storytelling. And they don't let the facts get in the way. Flashback to China, 2001, at the beginning of the 21st century. Everyone's riding high because they know in just 15 years, we'll all have hoverboards. Still have a year, scientists. Chinese authorities have just one thing that's concerning them. No, not poverty or pollution. I said something that's concerning them. The persecution of Falun Gong. It's been going on for 2 years, it's cost a lot of money, and public opinion is totally against it. No one even really knows why it's happening. According to Time magazine, many Chinese had felt that Falun Gong posed no real threat and that the state's persecution had gone too far. Not to worry, when the state controls the media, they can invent reasons. Now, stories they were running about Falun Gong practitioners spontaneously going insane and cutting open their stomachs lacked a little bit of believability, so they stepped up their game. On January 23rd, a group of people set themselves on fire in Tiananmen Square. They were a bunch of wacko Falun Gong practitioners trying to commit suicide because they thought they'd go to heaven. Police stopped them, every single media entity in China reported about it every day for a year, and public opinion turned against Falun Gong. Just what the Chinese regime wanted, especially when they saw this footage of one of the victims, a 12-year-old girl, forced by her mother to burn herself. But then the facts started rearing their ugly heads. Like why media first reported that there were 5 people there and then later changed it to 7. Why did there just happen to be dozens of police carrying fire extinguishers right there? They don't march around the square carrying fire extinguishers, and the nearest building was 20 minutes away round trip. How was it possible that Xinhua's English report came out hours before the Chinese, when usually any story needs to go through layers of censorship and controls to even get published in Chinese? Why, when hair is the first thing to burn, this man had all of his hair intact? Oh wait, why is the Sprite bottle filled with gasoline not even singed? Come to think of it, where did this footage even come from? Security cameras in Tiananmen are usually stationary, but these are moving around and zooming. And look at those close-ups. Who's taking that footage? And it looks like that police officer is waiting for someone to take a picture before he covers the guy with a blanket. Now, state media said it came from a CNN camera crew that was there reporting on routine protests by Falun Gong practitioners, but CNN said they were immediately detained and didn't shoot anything, so it couldn't possibly be their footage. And we know how Chinese police are. They aren't going to let folks take pictures. So who the heck shot this? Speaking of the CNN crew, remember that 12-year-old girl? They never saw a 12-year-old girl. But state media interviewed her. She was bandaged and she had to have a tracheectomy because of the burns and wait, she had a tracheectomy? That's where they cut a hole in your throat and stick a tube in so you can breathe through that. And she was giving interviews? It's incredibly hard to even talk after one of those. And what the heck is the reporter even doing in the same room as her? Burn victims are supposed to be in a sterile room, and this 12-year-old burn victim is giving interviews in an exposed room, and no one is wearing face masks. It's like they want her to get an infection, unless she's not actually burned. But if she's not burned, why did she suddenly die a few weeks later, right before she was supposed to leave the hospital? Oh my God. Now, as for her mother, the Falun Gong practitioner who dragged her to Tiananmen to immolate with her, yeah, well, turns out she wasn't a Falun Gong practitioner. Philip Han of the Washington Post went to her hometown of Kaifeng 2 weeks later and found out she worked in a nightclub, took money to keep men company, and beat her mother and daughter. No one ever saw her practice Falun Gong. Well, state media has an answer for that. The Washington Post article came out on February 4th. 4 days later, Xinhua reported she started practicing after the persecution began, so she did it secretly, even though a January 30th government report said she started practicing well before the persecution began. What is going on here? Okay, well, whoever she was, she did die during the immolation. That's a fact. And by died during the immolation, I mean, as the Boston Globe first pointed out, was bludgeoned. Boom. So, is it possible these people weren't really Falun Gong practitioners and were perhaps made to do this with the understanding that police would be right there with fire extinguishers to put out the flames? So, as all of these different Western media groups were beginning to realize something pretty fishy was going on, Chinese media changed their story again. Now they're saying that the Falun Gong practitioners did it as a means of protest against the persecution, not because they were trying to go to heaven. Well, yes, that is a bit more believable, except for the fact that you just changed your story and it's so clearly staged. And if they did it to protest the persecution, why did they immediately give interviews saying the persecution was a good thing? So, what did the Chinese regime do in the aftermath? Well, the first thing they do is ban the book Yellow Disaster by Wang Lixiong. In Chapter 2, someone pays off a group of terminally ill patients to burn themselves in Tiananmen Square so they can frame their opponents and thus begin a politically motivated persecution. But then they shove this self-immolation story down everyone's throat, not in just the media. This story is carried everywhere. Economic reports, retiree publications, chemistry journals, teacher training manuals, even elementary school textbooks. According to Philip Han, regular anti-Falun Gong classes are scheduled in schools. In Kaifeng, remember the hometown of that one lady, they make anti-Falun Gong stamps. Mickey Spiegel of Human Rights Watch wrote that 8 million students joined anti-Falun Gong organizations and 12 million children submitted writings criticizing Falun Gong. Freedom House reported the scale of imprisonment, torture, and deaths of Falun Gong practitioners in custody increased significantly. Ironically, Jiang Zemin, the mastermind behind the persecution, said if Falun Gong practitioners are beaten to death, it counts as suicide. And all throughout China, people viciously turn on Falun Gong practitioners. I still have people who tell me, I don't like Falun Gong because they burn themselves. Wake up! This story is obviously fake. If this were something Falun Gong practitioners did, why has it never happened before or since? Why is Falun Gong practice all over the world and yet it's always Falun Gong is an evil cult? What are you basing that on? Could it be stuff you heard from the Chinese Communist Party, who has spent almost 15 years and untold resources trying to crush Falun Gong? And this story isn't dead either. Just a few weeks ago, I reported on crazy Chinese millionaire Chen Guangbiao saying he was going to pay for 2 of these immolation survivors to have corrective plastic surgery. Think about that. These 2 women have been pretty much under house arrest for over a decade, only paraded out to talk to media about the self-immolation, and now he brings them to New York City for a press conference. Doesn't that sound a little fishy? Wait a minute. The real story, even with all its facts, is actually more interesting than the made-up one. Maybe the best kind of journalism isn't about getting clicks or listening to what your bosses say. Maybe it's about finding out and telling the truth to people. I wonder if anyone's ever told that to Chinese journalists. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Let me know what you think about the Tiananmen immolation. Leave your comments below, check out the Facebook and Twitter page, and subscribe for more episodes of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.